2009, more than 56 million children in sub-Saharan Africa had lost one or both parents due to a variety of causes. Approximately 1/4 of the deaths are due to HIV and AIDS, and the number of children without parental care is still on the increase, mainly in Eastern and Southern Africa. In Africa, orphan and vulnerable children are traditionally cared for by family members. Historically, members of the same family are under a moral obligation to care for one another, and children were assured of being cared for either by their own parents or by a family member. But that's not always the case. Often at times there are no adult relatives, or the relatives cannot afford to take in more kids, leaving the oldest child to care for his younger siblings. Many of these extended family networks are just simply too poor and cannot deal with the burden of caring for more children. Taking on more responsibility will push them beyond their ability to cope, and with the increasing number of children in need for alternative care, more and more children are being neglected and left to take on roles of caregivers at ages as young as 10 years old.
Tonight, imagine at the tender age of 10 being the sole responsibility of a household. That's the reality of life for scores of children in South Africa, a phenomenon known as child-headed households.
Various definitions of child-headed households have entered into use. In general terms, a child-headed household may be described as one in which the oldest child has assumed most of the responsibilities of a parent. These households more often than not lack the capacity to adequately provide for the children forming part of the household. Children living in child-headed households are extremely vulnerable to abuse as well as to economic and sexual exploitation.
Being exploited, they become vulnerable, especially to older men and married men in the community who say that under the pretext that I'll protect you or I'll give you some money for the day to feed the younger ones for sexual favors.
And although international and national laws in most countries state that the government is obliged to provide for children who are permanently or temporarily deprived of parental care with a suitable alternative, these governments do not regulate or have the resources to make sure that every child is monitored and cared for, meaning that there are limited places for children in need of alternative care arrangements. And amongst the growing population of orphan children, many are left to take care of themselves without guidance.
Rwanda is home to one of the world's largest proportions of child-headed households, with an estimated 101,000 children living in such circumstances. In Ireland, 101,000 children would account for around 10% of the population under 18 years old. Imagine if 1 in every 10 Irish children lived in a child-headed household. Consider this class of just over 190. This figure of 10% would mean that 19 of us would have come from a child-headed household. Except we wouldn't have, because these children who have a life expectancy of just 33 years are considered privileged if they receive even a few years of primary education. You all know this guy as Kiro, but for this video we are going to call him Patrick. Patrick is 17 years old and from Rwanda. Patrick's mother died from TB 2 years ago. She was HIV positive, as was his father who passed away the year before. Since his mother's death, Patrick has been responsible for the care of his 3 younger siblings, 9-year-old Eric, 6-year-old Corinne, and 4-year-old Sonia. Almost half of all children under the age of 5 in Rwanda suffer from chronic malnutrition. If we were to focus solely on children in child-headed households, this figure would increase dramatically. Patrick had to leave school after just 2 years and go out to work when his father's health left him bedridden. He is not able to read or write. The only jobs he can get involve hard labour over long hours with very little pay. There are days when Patrick and his brother do not eat at all so their sisters can have some food. Food is plain rice. Nutritious meats, fruits and vegetables are practically unheard of. More than 80% of all diseases that affect children in Rwanda are waterborne. Clean water is difficult to obtain, and sometimes, no matter how careful Patrick and his siblings are, they still get sick. Lack of health education and life knowledge greatly impacts on the series of events following ingestion of contaminated water. Patrick does not realise that it is the water that has made him sick. He has vomiting and diarrhea, feels thirsty, drinks some more water to quench the thirst, and gets sick again. He does not recognise the signs of dehydration and fever for what they are, and so he does not seek healthcare. He does not know how to access healthcare, even if he wanted to. Neither Patrick nor his siblings have been tested for HIV. Only half of all children in Rwanda who are in need of antiretroviral treatment receive it. Being from a child-headed household with no adult to give them a voice in the community and insufficient health education to understand the risk that they have been infected and the protocol for arranging testing means that Patrick and his siblings' chance of receiving treatment if necessary is almost non-existent. Recent studies have found that the psychological consequences of living in a child-headed household are another major issue. Patrick is constantly stressed and anxious about keeping his siblings fed and healthy and protecting them from all the dangers they are particularly vulnerable to. He wants them to have as normal a childhood as possible. He puts on a brave face in front of the younger children, but he misses his parents more than you could imagine. He has nobody to talk to about the way he feels.
In the context of Ireland, when a child loses both parents, a legal guardian will be selected and ultimately decided by the court, regardless whether a will stating the name of the guardian had been written or not, unless there are no obvious reasons to oppose. All family members and friends can proceed to nominate themselves for the role. The judge will then evaluate and determine who is well suited for the position, depending on what is the best interest of the child. Hence, the judge will not even choose the grandparents or sibling if they are not fit for the guardianship. The guardian will be responsible in providing a proper care for the child, particularly in the aspects of education, health, and general welfare. And each child will be assigned a social worker who observes the growth and development of the child and ensures that their best interests are always considered. And this is apart from providing support for the family. Another vital role of the social worker is to cultivate the relationship between the child and the family of the guardian. In order to support the child, the Ireland government will pay a guardian's payment as part of the social welfare benefits, which will be paid to the guardian with condition that it must aid the child. However, it can be paid directly to the orphan provided that he or she is between 18 to 20 years old, attending full-time education is not living with or under the care of the guardian. Basically, guardian's payment can be categorized into contributory or non-contributory. It is regarded contributory if either deceased parent had worked at any time and paid insurance for 26 weeks. It is non-contributory for those who are not entitled for the contributory payment.